All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a concept that is going to completely reframe how you look at human interaction. Now, usually when we try to figure out our behavior, especially when it comes to relationships, what do? We reach for rigid labels. We categorize ourselves, we categorize our partners, and we try to lock everything down into this neat, easily digestible answer. But the source material we're unpacking today offers a seriously profound alternative. Because here is the core truth of this entire approach. This is not about telling people the answer, as that puts people in boxes. It's about asking questions, which creates windows in the boxes society puts us in. We're looking at a fascinating framework called resonance mechanics. Let's start opening up some of those windows, shall we?
I want to start by asking you to pose this question directly to yourself right now. Are relationship labels putting you in a box? Think about the terms we just casually throw around every single day: toxic, needy, avoidant. Now, sure, they can be descriptive, but they so often trap us in this completely static narrative. Society loves these categories, but here's the reality. Human energy is not static. It's this living, breathing, constantly shifting force. When we just slap a label on a dynamic, we literally stop observing it. We stop seeing the actual underlying mechanics at play, and instead, we just react to the label we've blindly assigned it.
I absolutely love the specific language used in our source text here. It says, "This document is an open-source tool for individual resonance tracking. Findings are subject to observational fluid validation." It's brilliant. We are not setting up a court of law to judge someone's behavior. No, we are setting up a laboratory. We're acting as totally neutral scientists, just observing the data of our daily energy as it naturally fluctuates. Observational fluid validation simply means we watch, we test, and we adjust. It completely removes that heavy, exhausting weight of moral judgment from our day-to-day interactions.
So, what are we actually looking at here? Let's define it. Resonance mechanics is a non-dogmatic inquiry matrix. That means it maps out human interaction, frequency, and systemic alignment across a 24-hour cycle, without any rigid dogma attached. Think of it less like a strict rulebook telling you how to live your life, and way more like a fluid, observational dashboard. It's here to help you see exactly when you are operating, what frequency you are emitting, and how that frequency aligns or collides with the people around you. So how are you going to use this dashboard to measure your own interactions today?
Okay, moving on to Section 1, the Daily Resonance Clock. Let's look at how this physically works.
What you're seeing here is the thermodynamic resonance clock, and it shows us that we aren't just blindly moving through the hours of the day. We are actually moving through distinct energetic polarities. See how we start with these neutral buffers at midnight and midday? Those are your safe, stable, pH 7 foundations. But then look at the shifts. From 0100 to 0500 hours, and then again from 1300 to 1700 hours, the body enters a masculine acidic state. These are your recharge and demand phases. It's when your energy naturally turns inward to build structure. Now conversely, from 0700 to 1100 and 1900 to 2300, we swing into feminine alkaline states. These are output phases. Think selfless giveaway, expansion, sharing your energy with the world. And the really important takeaway here is that this clock suggests we all, men and women alike, every single one of us, cycle through these acidic demands and alkaline outputs every single day.
Which brings us to an absolutely essential inquiry method. You really have to ask yourself, what specific shifts in tone signify that my frequency is drifting from the baseline? If your baseline is that perfectly stable, neutral pH 7 we just talked about, what does it physically feel like when you drift into a high-intensity demand phase or a high-intensity output phase? Becoming hyper-aware of that precise tonal shift in your own voice, or even just your internal monologue, is step 1 in actually utilizing this dashboard. So what is your personal process for catching that precise tonal shift before it totally derails your day? Now let's talk about what happens when that drift goes totally unchecked, particularly during those selfless, high-intensity feminine giving hours. We need to identify specific signs of resonance loss during high-intensity feminine output phases. The sources actually highlight 3 major red flags. First up, energy scattering without a linguistic container. This basically means you're giving and doing for everyone else, but you aren't clearly communicating your own needs, so your energy is just bleeding out, totally unanchored. Second, failing to gradually settle into the baseline before that midday buffer hits. And third, hard transitioning into a cranky, least feminine output phase.
I mean, if you have ever felt completely depleted and highly irritable after a morning of intense caretaking or back-to-back team meetings, well, you have experienced this exact systemic resonance loss.
All right, section 2, neutrality during volatile pivots. This is where things get a bit spicy.
So while midnight and noon are nice, safe, stable anchors, you got to pay close attention to the timeline at 0600 and 1800 hours. The sources call these the irrational pivots. At 0600, 6 a.m., we have the thaw. This is a volatile transition where dormant potential energy suddenly snaps into kinetic energy as we wake up and shift from masculine recharge into feminine output. Then, at 1800, 6 p.m., we have the cooling, which is the necessary release of all that projective heat from your afternoon, gearing up for the evening's dissolution. Guys, these transition hours are literally where the sparks fly. They are unpredictable, they're irrational, and they carry the absolute highest risk for nasty arguments and emotional volatility.
So the vital inquiry we have to make here is, how can an observer maintain a neutral stance during the volatile pivot hours? Seriously, when your partner aggressively snaps at you at 6 p.m. right after walking through the door from work, or when you feel irrationally stressed out and angry at 6 a.m., how do you stop yourself from instantly reacting defensively and falling right back into the box of an argument?
Well, you might be wondering, how can I observe my reactions to cranky phases as a neutral data point? The answer is a complete mindset shift. You have to treat these cranky phases not as systemic relationship failures, but just as neutral data points. It is quite literally just an acidic recharge demand, or the natural friction of an alkaline output transition. By adopting this neutral witness stance, you depersonalize the entire interaction. Your partner's crankiness at 1800 hours isn't an attack on your character. It's measurable thermodynamic physics. They are simply trying to cool down their projective heat. So, how can you personally observe your own reactions to these cranky phases as neutral data points instead of immediately taking the emotional bait?
Moving right along. Section 3, Rabbit versus Communication Windows. Now, we need to explicitly contrast a rabbit window dynamics with the requirements of the communication windows. This is a brilliant distinction from the granular protocol. We essentially have two very different windows for intimacy. First up, the rabbit windows. These happen during acidic feminine peaks, think 0200, 0400, 1400, or 1600 hours. This is a state of direct, raw demand and recharge. During these windows, no verbal explanation of needs is required at all. The sheer density and intensity of the archetype provide all the energetic grounding you need. Now contrast this with the strict requirements of the communication windows, which pop up during alkaline feminine peaks like 0800, 1000, 2000, or 2200 hours. Because this is an output phase built on selfless giving, your energy is flying absolutely everywhere. Therefore, intimacy in these windows absolutely requires a linguistic container. You literally must explicitly explain what you need from your partner with words, otherwise that energy scatters straight into resentment.
Next up, section 4, grounding the 1200 anchor. Let's look at the math of relationships. Okay, consider this fascinating stress test scenario provided in the sources, a 9+3 couple. Now, in this diagnostic framework, a 9 is a high masculine man and a 3 is a highly masculine woman. What does that actually mean? It means both partners in this dynamic are intensely projective, deeply acidic, and constantly demanding recharge. So, we really need to analyze why a 9+3 couple structure often collapses without this protocol. Without a conscious framework, two high-drive, masculine acidic partners are inevitably going to clash. It's guaranteed. They are both constantly pushing energy outward, which creates massive thermal buildup. Because neither one of them is inherently designed to absorb or yield in this state, there is simply no natural mechanism to cool the system down. It leads to exactly what the source calls systemic capture in the absolute worst acid state. If you find yourself in a high-stress dynamic like this, what process do you actually use to intentionally cool the system down before it blows up?
Well, here's the rescue protocol. How does applying the 1200-hour anchor stabilizing a collapsing relationship? It's all about mathematical grounding. Step 1, identify the non-grounded thermal buildup. That's our 9+3 couple right there. Step 2, apply the 1200-hour differential, which represents our perfectly stable, perfectly safe pH 7 baseline. That is the sovereign target. Step 3 is where the real action happens. To achieve that mathematical balance, the feminine partner in the relationship must consciously, intentionally shift into a taking position. By strategically absorbing rather than projecting, step 4 seamlessly occurs. That volatile thermal energy is finally grounded back down to the stable pH 7 center.
We really have to focus on how the 1200-hour anchor prevents systemic capture in high-stress scenarios. It is a deliberate, mechanical, and highly effective intervention to stop a total relationship meltdown.
And finally, Section 5, Inquiry for Ongoing Alignment. Let's wrap this all up.
I really want to leave you with this final, crucial thought. What inquiry methods reveal if my current frequency is aligned with this protocol? Honestly, it all boils down to asking yourself this exact question right now. And honestly, whenever you feel that heat rising during your day, is the intensity of this moment actually serving the sovereign center, that stable pH 7 foundation? Or is it being completely hijacked by the ego's demand for extraction? By stopping to ask this question, you step right out of the box of blind, conditioned reaction, and you open a window to real, measurable systemic alignment. So keep asking questions, and keep observing the data.